Thank you guys for tuning into this channel. I am your host, Will Smith. This is WSC, where we cover tech, life, and entertainment. Today, I have a special guest with us today. He is a Chicago historian, local celebrity. He's covered things around history of Chicago on TikTok, Instagram, and other platforms. So thank you guys for tuning in. Sit back and enjoy yourself.
Sherman Dilla Thomas. I'm a Chicago historian, born and raised in this amazing city. Proud father of 7. I'm a husband.
Nice.
Content creator. I run Chicago Mahogany Tours, and I also work for a light company.
Nice, nice, nice. Tell us your stories, man. Tell us what got you into what you're doing. What are some of the things that fascinates you when you first started off, and what's your story? How did you get here?
That's a hard one to answer, I guess. I've been loving Chicago history my whole life, right? I'm a son of a cop, so he kind of etched the love in Chicago into me. How did I get here, per se? TikTok, man. Like I said, I had 7 kids at the time. I had an 8-year-old daughter who was being introduced to the app. And what I saw was that if it had anything to do with Chicago, it wasn't positive. So yeah, I wanted just for my kids to see something positive about Chicago on TikTok. So I started making Chicago TikToks, just talking about the history of our city, some of the stuff that's happened, what we contribute to the world. And the page took off, and so that afforded me different opportunities to be on publications and TV. I think my first break was I did the TikTok about Dibs. It's this Chicago institution where we put baby strollers, ironing boards, the horses from Streets and Sanitation, baby toys. The dude has froze a pair of jeans, but anyway, we use all these apparatuses to block our parking spots after we've shoveled it out. So we call that Dibs. And I told the story of where it came from when it started. And the next day I was on WGN News. And then after that, the Chicago Tribune did like a feature on me. Yeah. And then that's when things started to take off.
Do you remember that time where you had to shovel up the snow? Yeah. And you put that chair, and you just know, hey man, don't touch
this chair.
Don't touch this chair, or danger.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So after that kind of helped you kind of like skyrocket, you know, you started doing a lot more history. You started covering different avenues in Chicago that people don't know about. What is some fascinating facts that people may not know too much about Chicago, whether they actually be here or maybe?
It spans the gambit from like my shirt say, right? Everything dope about America comes from Chicago. Yeah. And everything from like how the chocolate brownie came to be. It's because in the 1890s, women mostly wore like white lace gloves everywhere, right? The fancy ladies. And so that limited the types of food you could have through the day because you didn't want nothing to mess up your lace gloves. And so Bertha Palmer, who's the wife of the person who created the Palmer House Hilton, she had the chefs come up with a dessert that wouldn't lose its form as the heat went on. And that dessert is the chocolate brownie, right? But then you can go further than that. A surgeon from Cook County Hospital performed the world's first ever organ transplant. Right?
What? So, that's crazy.
Right? So it all the way from a dessert to something that's seen today as like standard life-saving stuff, right? If you're lucky enough to get on a kidney list or a donation list, right? You get another organ, it sustains your life, right? That first time that was ever successfully done in Chicago, bro.
We got so much great history here. I like architecture and I like technology. So I love hearing about all of the greats, Frank Lloyd Wright, Mies van der Rohe, and all of those like architectural greats. But what's a piece of Chicago's history that is something that you really like or really proud of? I'm sorry to put that on the spot. I need to give you some time to think.
I'm so proud of so much of it. It rotates based off of sometimes what we find ourselves in a year, right? Yeah. During Christmas time, I'm like crazy proud that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is from Chicago.
Get out.
That's a Chicago thing, right? Sometimes In September, right, we celebrate Mexican Independence Day, and we have the only Mexican-American accredited art museum in our city, right? It's the only one in the country, right, that's accredited. It's the National Mexican-American Art Museum in Pilsen. So sometimes that's my favorite kind of history tidbit.
That's crazy.
Black History Month comes from Chicago, right? Yeah, Wabash YMCA, Carter G. Woodson created the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And they came up with Negro Achievement Week, and we have now turned that into Black History Month, man. So it's hard to answer. Even today, right? Just simply today, we're not too far off from the Bud Billiken Parade, right? And that's the largest Black parade in this country. So it changes all the time.
It's really interesting to see how we've came here, because, like, you know, as we are here today, we here due to combinations of things that may have happened in the past, whether they be good or bad.
Right.
But we're here, and it's good to like learn about this stuff. You know,
it's true what they say. If you don't know where you've been, you won't be able to know where you're going.
Yeah.
And history repeats itself. And so if you're aware of what worked, what didn't work, right? You may have a politician come along that's talking about policies that we tried and it didn't work. You may have someone come along talking about policies that did work. We didn't give them enough chance to continue working. But if you understand history, it'll help you shape those kind of lessons. And then history tells you what's happening now. So if you go to a place like the South Side or the West Side and you see vacant lots, you may think contemporarily these people don't care about that space. But if you know history, you know that they got divested in, right? You know that those areas was redlined. So history is vitally important.
And you meant, when you mentioned that, I had a few things that came to mind. So like old department stores, like, was it Montgomery Ward, Marshall Fields, Sears, and you know, how did, I guess, you know, if you know that offhand, I know you're a dictionary. I know you know your stuff, but I guess what were some of those department stores? How did they come into factor, and like, why are they not here now?
Well, I think the answer to the second question, they're not here now. In some instances, we as a society have allowed ourselves to remove things that benefit us in the name of convenience, right? Like, it was something to be said about going to a store and associating with other people and having a salesman help you try it on. Like, all of those things fed into your spirit. If you was having a bad day, but you still needed to go get your son's button-up shirt, maybe that interaction with that cashier would be that thing that pull you out of that slump, right? Like, people would recognize that something's wrong. We most of the time do, like, man, bro, what's wrong? You know? Yeah. So
get in touch with our community.
You get to recognize faces more. I seen him at the mall the other day. He cool. You know what I mean? So it's tragic that we've allowed that to happen. But they mean so much, right? Montgomery Ward invented mail order catalogs. There was no such thing as you at home ordering something and then having it sent to your house, right? That comes from Chicago. He also invented COD, right? Cash on delivery. So you would fill out the slip in the mail order catalog, mail it in. They would process your order. The delivery dude would come with it, and if you had the money, you get the money, you get your good, right? That's like Amazon Prime today, right? You
Dude,
pay for it first, right? So,
for real.
Yeah, that comes from Chicago. Same thing with Sears, Roebuck and Company. They were pioneers. You could buy your house out the Sears, Roebuck catalog, and they would bring all the equipment needed to build the house and drop it off on your lot. And then you could build it yourself.
Wait a minute. So Sears made that concept?
Yeah.
Dude, you know, like, Home Depot has like that type of concept right now. I thought they like.
Nah, they stole that from us. That comes from Sears, Roebuck and Company.
What? Oh my gosh. All right, that's a nugget. I gotta put that down. Yeah, dude. So like, all right. So for example, there's an item, and I can share with you later. Home Depot for like. They range. It'd be 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand. But basically, if you have land, you have a plot and permit, whatever, you can build a house based on these specifications, and then they route you to the contractors that can build it too. Yeah. But damn, dude, seriously.
It would. The only help you would need is the bricklayers, right? Because that's masonry's precision, right? If it ain't correct, you're gonna have some problems. But
yeah.
Like, a dude and his drunk uncles would frame it out, rough out the plumbing, and Sears would drop it all to you. Like you said, if you had the permits, You mailed in the permits, they send you all the stuff.
That's
and
amazing.
it was really, really cool. It's a lot of Sears built houses in places like um, Streeter, places in the Rock Falls area near Iowa.
Yeah.
Tons of that rural area. Polo, Illinois, Rock Falls, so much of the Dixon, so much of that stuff out there got still standing Sears built homes.
And they're still around.
Oh man, still around. The cool thing about that is, so some of them were built in like the 1920s, 1910s.
Okay.
And so their third generation still living in it, right? Because the son got it and the son passed it on to his son.
Yeah.
And so now that grandson that owns it knows where every screw is. He there's nothing. It's amazing. I encourage people to go out there, man. It's a trip.
Are they like historic? Like
no.
No.
I mean, some that are. There are some in the country that have that designation, right? This is a Sears built home, and somebody was smart enough to put a sign in front of it.
Damn. Okay. Okay. And that brings another question too, man. I didn't need to bring, but so I've noticed there's differences in like housing styles. Like I don't know if you know about that, but there's like differences in housing styles. Like I don't know, you got the prairie style, and when you go
bungalow,
further down,
you
bungalow,
got Queen Anne's,
and then like I don't know. Have you noticed like all the houses on the south side kind of all look the same?
Yeah.
Is that like by design?
So we have what's called the Chicago Bungalow Belt.
Okay.
Right. So bungalows are the brick frame houses that are about a story and a half, has the pitch roof, right? Excuse me. They found Belmont Cragen, they found Auburn Gresham, they found Chatham, they found in Roseland. They're called the Bungalow Belt because how they're built, where you find them makes like a belt around the map of Chicago. We started to grow our neighborhoods. So Chicago's very, very small, 1889. Then we started to buy up everything. We annexed Hyde Park, we annexed Pullman, we annexed Jefferson Township, we annexed Lakeview. And so the city grows. So by the 19-teens, though, we still have all these pockets of like former farmland. And so in 1909, we decided that we changed the street grid, right? We make State and Madison the central point. But then we also say a Chicago lot size is 25 by 125, right? So now you need to figure out how to put a lot of house on this sort of small lot size. And the bungalow becomes the perfect thing because it has these long hallways. You can get a 3-bedroom and a bathroom and a attic and a basement and a garage because you're taking that 125 feet length. And so they're perfect and they get built like crazy. We built over like maybe 230,000 of them.
Damn.
And then we build the 2 flats in that same kind of number. So the south side, had a lot of farm and vacancies still about 1909, and so that's why they're there.
That also brings another question. So like differences in neighborhoods and how things have changed over time. So you mentioned like on the south side, you got in certain areas, you got bungalows and stuff. I guess what drove us to have different areas mixed with different blends of cultures and
a little sadly, right? Like a lot of stuff in our world, systemic racism and kind of targeting, right? So we had these things in Chicago called restrictive racial covenants. And what that meant was that if 90% of property owners in a particular geographic area, let's say Woodlawn, or let's say Mount Greenwood, or let's say Avondale, or let's say, Andersonville, right? If 90% of the property owners in that neighborhood said we won't lease our house to or sell our house to Black folks, brown folks, Jewish folks, then that area had a legally binding restrictive covenant. Most of the time it would say, you need to be of European descent to buy here. And so because of that, like 80% of Chicago had these covenants. And so that's where the ethnic enclaves come from. Because if you were outside of that 80%, well, that becomes the Black Belt. If you're outside of that 80%, then all of the Mexican homies live together. All the Asian homies live together. So they create those pockets. And then inside of places that had the covenants, there still was like all the Irish people, they go to the churches out over in Bridgeport, right? So they all will live near where they go to church. And just over time, these neighborhood pockets develop based off of cuisine, right? It's a lot of Asian Indians on Devon Avenue.
Yep.
You know, they all moved there because that's where they can find the spices and the clothing that reminds them of home. And then because of the size of Chicago, it allows for those pockets to kind of develop themselves.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think, man. In the turmoil, right? We got beauty, we got great music, great people, great culture. You know, like now I feel like, you know, there's still a little tension, but at least now we're able to walk down the street.
Yeah,
and, you know, I know you mentioned you like music, you like the culture. You know, can you maybe talk about how that has changed, or how that have came across due to like differences in history, like, you know, like the Great Migration, like you got the blues and jazz, but then also maybe even currently now where we have rap, house, you know, the whole R&B's such and such.
We're such a, even now, third largest city in the country, and we're not in the top 5 for cost of living. Right there, you can, for $2,500, live in a condo downtown Chicago and look at some water, right? With $2,500 in New York, you're gonna be in a closet, right? Yeah. Especially in the urban city, in downtown Manhattan, forget about it.
We're gonna see of trash.
It ain't gonna happen, right? It ain't gonna happen in DC. It's not gonna happen in LA. We starting to get cheaper than Atlanta, which is really, really crazy. Wow. And it's always sort of been like that. So the musical influences start with just like affordability, but then also because we're the third largest city in the world, we got radio, TV, and we've always had it since it began, right? It was we've had radio and TV. So if you're a blues player in Mississippi, they're not putting your stuff on the radio in the 1940s. So you come to Chicago to get on the radio. Yeah. But then all of the blues players come up here. So now you live in this pocket with all these creative people. Y'all bound to make some amazing stuff. Same thing with like gospel music. The black folks, very spiritual black folks, are leaving the South because of lynching, because of sharecropping, for better opportunities, better jobs. Yeah. And so now, say like in a place you know, you watch one of those old black movies, it's always like the one good singer in the choir, and you know, the whole church is relying on it. Yeah. When you come to Chicago, like it's 5 of them that can sing just like that. And 5 organists, right? So that also helps create this beautiful art. But even across like different genres, man, there's a lady named Rita Simo that I want the world to know about. She created this thing in Edgewater that's called the People's Music School. Okay. So if Brother Will want to learn how to play the piano, it's free. But after you learn, so if you take 3 years of lessons, you got to give 3 years of lessons. Every lesson you give, you got to agree to give, right? Once you get proficient. And so that place has been running for, I don't know, 40, 50 years now. And it started out the kindness of a lady's heart who was a nun. And she stopped being a nun to push this People's Music School, right? Interesting. Irish folk music was, by and large, kept because the Irish chief of police in Chicago quit the police department and he started to collect this folk music. That's where we get the bagpipes from. That's where we get a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know, blues and jazz. So you know, you got
Buddy Guy, Etta James, right, who sung Ad Last. She sung that in Chicago, right?
Really?
Yeah, 21st in Michigan at Chess Records, right? That's where that album was recorded. What? Chuck Berry recorded his songs. 21st in, right, Bo Diddley, 21st in Michigan.
Man, and you know, people don't even give Chuck his recognition. You know, he's done so much. Was it the Twist?
Yeah, he's one of the inventors of rock and roll, right? Him and Bo Diddley sped up the way they play the guitar, and that's now like the rock standard.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Okay, so, and then like those influences of those times, maybe coming back down to like maybe the rap, or not even rap, maybe like house. Yeah. So like, how did house come apart? Or
well, I'm glad you asked that, because as a black dude from the South Side, sometimes you're raised in a way that you become older and you don't necessarily agree with, right? So I can admit for myself that coming from the hood, coming from a Vietnam veteran, policeman, it was homophobia in my career, right? Like, you know, if your dad said you throw like a girl, or if you fell down, he said quit being a sissy or something like that, right? That's how I was raised. So I say all that to say, when we talk about house music, we always say that Frankie Knuckles invented house music in Chicago, But what we need to say is that a gay black man leaving New York, seeking, wanting to find other people, opened a club called The Warehouse near downtown Chicago. The building is now a Chicago landmark. It's on Clinton Street, I believe, right about Adams. So not too far away from Clinton and Adams. And they party at this place called The Warehouse. And they're remixing disco, and they're remixing R&B, right? They're like adding these, what we now call techno, what we now call house. They're creating it in that building, but it was really a safe space and it ain't even like how we think of like drag or androgynous or nothing like that. Just a place where a dude can go have some fun and chill and not be judged for whatever reason. And out of that, The Warehouse comes house music.
Wow. Wow. And then that's where like the Chicago greats, Frankie Knuckles.
Yeah. So they from there, then this pioneering radio station gets they hire 6 people to hot mix 5 people, hot mix 5. And these 5 DJs, they're the ones that go on, Frankie Knuckles, Farley Jack, right? All these guys go on to take house to the world.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so I guess the debate is always like, okay, who started it, right? So you got Detroit house, you got New York house, unfortunately. But I guess that's a dumb question.
It's unarguable.
What?
They left disco. They took disco from New York and came to Chicago and created house. And then you have to come through Chicago to get to Detroit. There's no other way, right?
Yeah.
You can't cut across Wisconsin. It's lakes. You got to get on a boat or something, right?
Yeah.
You can't come from New York and cut across the top of the country. You have to go through Chicago to get to Detroit, period. Flying, if you take a train. And so on the way to Detroit, a lot of musicians stopped in Chicago and they picked up that sound and they took it to Detroit. But Detroit ain't invent house music at all.
Y'all hear that?
Not at all.
Y'all hear that?
Yeah, okay. They dope with theirs. I appreciate Detroit. They got a culture and a swag like none other.
Yeah.
They killing hip hop right now. There's a definitive, kind of T Grizzly sound that's out there now that that these is Detroit cats. Of course, Big Sean, but no, y'all can't have house music or footwork. Neither one of those come from Detroit.
All right, dude, going to footworking. So how did because I mean, like, bro, juking parties, footworking, them dark '80s parties when you just, like, how did footworking come along?
When I tell you, you're gonna be so mad that you didn't think of it on your own. So, you ever heard of the Montu African dancers or Alvin Ailey so there's Catherine Dunham is from Chicago, right? She's considered the mother of modern dance. And so we have this rich dance history here already. And in the 60s and 70s, there was this big come back to Africa, come see Africa kind of push, right? This Pan-Africanism. So these young girls who go on to start Montu Dance Company and these other Afrocentric dance companies in the 60s, they go to Nigeria and Ghana. Particularly, they see this thing called the New Yam Festival, where the African dudes with the mask are footworking. So then these people get older and they become teachers, but they teach on the West Side, Marshall High School, Prosser. And they're teaching these kids in the 80s and 90s this African dance, and those kids speed it up with the ghetto juke. We used to call juke music ghetto house. And so they, on the West Side, create footworking, but it's based off of the African dances that they teachers taught them, right, in high school.
Montu. Yeah. Okay. So that's crazy to think, man, that it came from...
It's a direct path from Africa.
Dang, that's
Chicago.
That's amazing. Yeah. So all our parties, we just gotta get love back to the motherland.
Yeah, right. It all go back there.
That's crazy. Okay. So and then even rap too. Like I know rap, we all know it's 50th anniversary for it, but then it all, it came from New York,
the Bronx.
But maybe that history in Chicago itself.
We get to it a little late. Cap One and Common, of course, Tongue Twister as he started, and then he becomes Twister. I would say Common is the one that kind of breaks us. He's the first rapper to have like a video on MTV and BET and Jukebox that shows Chicago. So even if Twister broke out a little before, his videos like kind of in a studio sort of thing. But Common was the first to like show you 87th, and so
is that the corner?
No, a little way
Even
before
before
the corner.
that. Okay,
way before. He was Common Sense back then. Common.
Okay.
Man, Ice Cube just told an amazing story. He came to Chicago in 1991 to do a concert at the old with the new Regal Theater on 79th Street.
Dang, the Regal.
And this is so long ago that the DJs played records.
Yeah.
And so you would rap on top of your record, and they left the record, Today Was a Good Day, at the previous show. So Common Sense and his mama car drove Ice Cube to the record store so they could buy Today Was a Good Day so he could do it at the concert that night. And Cube never forgot that, so when he was able to open the doors for Common, he did. And so, it's fair to say that mainstream Chicago hip hop, you can kind of trace it back to Common.
How about like more recent ones like Lupe Fiasco and that whole.
Of course, Kanye, right?
Kanye,
sometimes our brother Yeezy get us in some trouble as Chicagoans, but you can't deny I would say he sits at the top of Chicago rap just as far as what he's been able to accomplish and that sort of thing, right? Loosely responsible for like 2 Chainz. Of course, he is responsible for Big Sean, so stuff like that, right? Kid Cudi, that kind of thing. Then it's a new class of rappers now, the Lil Durks and the G Herbos and the Chief
Keefers.
They certainly got an audience too. Lupe and he found himself a great pocket, right? The Chances of the world.
Yeah. Skaters, weird guys.
I think that they would they don't always get associated with Chicago rap just because of the type of rap that they do is I call it like maybe universal backpack sort of thing, right? It's thought provoking, right? But it's Chicago. It's definitely Chicago.
Like you said, it makes you want to explore, thought provoking. Like, man, what if I could go to? He got this one song I really like, Paris, Tokyo.
Yeah.
And I heard that song, I'm like, damn, I want to go to Paris and Tokyo because I'm big into like that type of stuff and traveling.
Yeah. Now Lupe, I know Lupe. He's a really solid dude. What most people don't know is that Lupe's father is one of the first black dojo owners in the city. So if you see Lupe on his Instagram going through motions, he ain't faking. Do not run up on Lupe. You're going to have a bad day. Nice. He's certainly like an 8th degree black belt in multiple disciplines.
That's crazy.
He got it from his pops.
That's crazy, man. No, that's good, man. All right, so changing subjects. Let's talk about politics. Maybe, like you said, 3rd biggest city in the world or in the country. We've got some great leaders here from like Harold Washington. What are some good facts or things that, I guess the story of them, the greats that came here and maybe have done things. I know Martin Luther King has came here and a couple other great people.
Of course, Obama started his started off as a community organizer in Argyle Gardens housing projects because Argyle Gardens was built on top of a city garbage dump. So he used to dump the garbage from the Pullman neighborhood and Roseland neighborhood on that site all the way until like 1935. Then we put some grass on top of it and we threw 15,000 black people in there. Wow. And from 1940 to 1996, 1/2 of every pregnancy had an issue, right? From 1940 to 1996, no resident lived past like 85. They all died of cancer or something because they're living on top of a toxic donut, right? It's literally the garbage is coming up from the ground, you're breathing it, right? You can try to clean the water as much as you want. The pipes are running through hundreds of years of methane and garbage, right? So in advocating for them to have different housing, take the asbestos out their house, change out the water pipes. So that's what got Obama running, right? That's such a uniquely Chicago story that I don't think
no one really knows. Right.
Not just that, but it was the type of thing that propelled him faster because if you take on that, you can, you get people's attention.
Yeah.
And of course, we had, so there's this thing in this country, it was called Reconstruction. And then after Reconstruction, they changed a lot of laws and there were no black people in Congress. The first person to be in Congress after that is a Chicagoan. His name is Oscar DePriest, very, very famous politician. And then of course, our first black mayor, Harold Washington. A lot of people skip straight to that. He was a congressman. He and Ralph Metcalf were some of the congressmen that very early wanted to make King holiday nationally, right? He is the person that made King's birthday a state holiday because he was a state legislator. He was trying to make weed legal in the 70s in Chicago because he knew how disproportionate the sentences were for people based off of their skin color. Lot of cool stuff, man. Of course, Carol Moseley Brown, she's the first black woman ever to be a U.S. senator. She's from Chicago.
Moseley Brown, okay.
Yeah. I don't think we've had another black woman senator since. No, Kamala.
I'd like to know about even how Chicago was founded by a black black immigrant, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was half French, half Haitian. We mostly pronounce it Du Sable. The Haitians will tell you that it's pronounced Du Sab. Yeah, right. They don't play about it either. And I don't know if you met some Haitians. They are an intense group of people. So when I'm around them, I pronounce his name correctly, right? But he was a linguist. He was married to a very popular Native American lady named Kithiwatha. She came from, her great uncle was like the chief of the Ojibwe. And so he was plugged. And that's really what grows Chicago. By the 1770s, 1780s, Native Americans had stopped trading with white people that they didn't know because of how much land we had took by that point. And so this was one of the safest trading routes, no matter your ethnicity, race, because he was half French, so the French trusted him. He was a darker complected dude, so Yankee Americans had familiarity with darker complected dudes. Yeah. And then he was married to a Native American, so the Native Americans felt safe here. So it's this trading post that grows into Chicago. When you don't honor people in their appropriate time, you're gonna pay for it later. So we have the Kinsey Street Bridge, the Kinsey Street Hotel, Kinsey School, Kinsey Chop House. John Kinsey for a long time was considered the father of Chicago. So if instead of the bridge being Kinsey Street Bridge, we would have called it the DuSable Street Bridge after the true founder of Chicago, then we could leave Lakeshore Drive alone. But as a historian, I don't really like changing the name or nothing either, right? Like I'm a set in my ways, middle-aged black dude too, but I understand we are all going to be dressed up nicely in a box way longer than we're not.
Dang.
And so why do we get so much say on an environment that's going to live way beyond us?
Yeah.
So in 75 years, everybody that was in love with Lakeshore Drive is not even going to be here anymore. And from that point on, we'll be honoring the person who founded this city. So sometimes that's needed, and it don't taste good, right?
Yeah.
But then there are also times where the community will speak for itself. So John Marshall is a high school on the west side, and John Marshall was a Supreme Court justice who would always vote in favor of segregation, in favor of not giving black people certain rights. And so the community in like 2019 decided that they were going to change the name of John Marshall High School because, he was this dude. 65-year-old black dudes from the West Side protested because they said, my freaking high school diploma says John Marshall. We know who he was, but we're Marshall men, and this is a heritage that we're proud of. And you can explain who he was without changing the name because my father went to Marshall, and I got his Marshall jacket, and I want the name. And so the community listened, and we didn't change the name, right? So I think it always should be left up to the community, particularly the youth, because they're going to live long enough to deal with the consequences of our actions.
Yeah. No, wow, that's important. No, and that's just crazy to think, like, the original founder. And I just wonder, can you imagine how Chicago would have been in 1700s?
He started, he was here 1780s. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
None of that was there.
A tree in the world.
Yeah. Nothing that we look at every day was here, that's for sure.
And then, you speed up a little bit, Chicago Fire, 1871, man. Yeah. Tell me about that crazy story.
Yeah, it's, one, we got to start blaming that lady's cow. That ain't what happened. At the time, the Irish were living in what we refer to as shanties. And so the area where the fire started was called Shanty Town. And because the Irish dudes was poor, poor today, at least you got a bathroom, right? In some instances, if you're not houseless. But poor in those days, there's no such thing as indoor plumbing, right?
Yeah, the
And
outhouse.
so the neighborhood had it. Then you got your farm animals, right? Because it was very agricultural. And so it was basically like this dumb lady didn't know enough to not have a lit flame by a cow, right? So what you think he gonna do? He gonna kick the lantern on and he was scared. When really what happened was, best that we can understand is somebody set a fire thinking that they'd be able to put it out quickly. And the fire got away from them. It burned down her barn. Her barn was the first barn to be burned down, but she was in bed asleep. Multiple investigations, even in those days, proved that somebody had to knock on her door to wake her up to tell her the fire started. Yeah. So how was she in there with a lamp if they had to wake her up because her house was on fire, right? The two don't make sense. But out of that, so that part of the story is false. But it is true is that immediately we went into this rebuild, right? Maybe about 5 years before that, Western Union Telegraph, and Morse code and all that stuff that got developed. And so had the fire happened in 1861, maybe Chicago ain't what Chicago is today. But because it happened in 1871, you could get the word to New York, and then folks with money saw an opportunity. So if your business just burned out, the money bags from New York were like, I'll buy that land, right? Because, you know, they'll be able to do it. And now it's cheaper than it ever would be. And so that's what grows our city.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So
the only parts of downtown burned. We like to say that the entire city burned. It did not. Nothing on the west side of the Chicago River, right? So like St. Ignatius Church in high school is one of like 5 public buildings that are still standing from the pre-fire, but the fire didn't get over there.
So yeah, I mean the conception is damn near all of Chicago got burned.
Yeah,
you know?
no. So 85% of the Chicago's business district got burned.
Oh, the financial district?
Yeah, just in financial district, shopping, State Street, right?
Wow.
You know, everything what we call a loop.
And that's, I mean, compared to the Chicago land, that's like.
But then, so in fairness, in 1871, Chicago stopped at 39th Street. Chicago stopped at Western Avenue. Chicago stopped at the Lake, and Chicago stopped at North Avenue.
Damn.
Right. So that's all Chicago was.
Right there.
Right. Everything else that you think about was not a part of Chicago.
Okay. And then, of course, through time, things have expanded and bring out more people. Okay. Okay. Dang. Wow.
It's called annexation. We bought up our suburbs. Okay. And it's actually, we started to do it. So that's why New York has 5 boroughs. New York was only Manhattan. Brooklyn was its own city. Bronx was its own city, right? Long Island was its own city. But then when Chicago started to buy up Hyde Park, Pullman, New York was like, oh, they might be bigger than us. We can't have that. And so they annexed the 5 boroughs to one city. So that's why they were #1 in population. At that time, we were #2.
Wow.
Yeah. We're still the fastest ever growing city. Houston's trying to catch us now, but we went from 500 to 4,000 to 300,000 to 1 million to 3 million. Fast.
Yeah. What are some of the major corporations that came here? You know, I know you mentioned earlier Sears, Marshall Fields, Montgomery Ward,
Turtle Wax. Right? You want to wax your car. And Turtle Wax comes from Chicago. You ever rode a swim bicycle?
Yeah.
Swim bicycle comes from Chicago, right? Oscar Mayer comes from Chicago. Oscar Mayer Winner invented in Chicago, But Oscar Mayer comes from Chicago.
That's crazy.
Worldwide company. Boeing starts in Chicago. Of course, Motorola starts in Chicago. Very huge company. They practically invent the cell phone. They practically invent two-way radio. Right? All that stuff comes from Chicago. Yeah. A lot of big corporations, bro.
Yeah, and since you mentioned tech, since this is a tech channel, we got to go into some tech. So you mentioned like Motorola and some of those, like the first phones and stuff. I guess, could you maybe explain some technical breakthroughs?
It would depends on, today we define tech in another way than they did historically, right? True. But I would call the invention of the remote control tech, right? The remote control, Eugene Pulley in Chicago working for RCA, he invents the remote control, the wireless remote control, right? Just what as a person that's not very familiar with tech terminology, right? I assume that a light refractor got to get sent to, signals got to get sent, right? That's a lot of technology for the 1950s. So the remote control comes from here. But we also pioneer a lot of medical technology, right? As it relates to stents and implementations that we install in your body. A lot of those things come from Chicago. You know, it's hard to beat the commercial cell phone, right? The first ever commercial cell phone call was 1981 from Soldier Field to a dude in Philadelphia.
You lying? Right? That's crazy.
So that's a ton of tech. But even before that, right? The dishwasher gets invented here in Chicago in the World's Fair. Priest Ziegler, he's a Father Ziegler, he's a Catholic priest.
Yeah.
He learns that silk has these absorbing properties. And so he's the one that comes up with the bulletproof vest, right? Made of silk and now Kevlar. It's a Catholic priest in Chicago, right? I would call that technology for sure.
For real. Yeah. Can you imagine a priest with a bodyguard?
Right? Well, it's
for real.
Exactly. It was for that reason though, during the Capone era. So today Chicago in the news because of our crime, but it's really like citizen on citizen. In the Capone era, the police got killed. Right? No, more police officers in Chicago were killed between 1920 and 1940 than from 1940 to now. Right?
Wow.
Right. So in 20 years, 30 years, more than cops sadly have lost their lives than the following next 75 and 80 years, right? And so that's why he comes up with the bulletproof vest, because he wants to protect policemen.
Okay. Man, good segue. So basically, the old gangsters, man, tell us the story between them. Like, how did it first start? You said, you mentioned the 20s. What was some revolution?
They started a little bit before that. What happens is we lift up the city, right, to install sewers.
Okay.
Right. We call it Wacker Drive today, Lower Wacker Drive, right? We install these cold tunnels. Today your house is heat by forced air, gas, something like that. Everything was burning coal in early Chicago. And so we had all these cold tunnels so that buildings wouldn't have to get their coal deliveries topside. It was all done underground. And so when we lift the city to create those pathways, we created a second city. And so where do you think the police gonna police? Up top or down in the coal mines and all that, right? So that down there in the lower Chicago, we start to create crime in the 1880s, 1890s, maybe a little tad bit before that. Michael McDonald is the first ever crime lord. Of course, he becomes an alderman. And then it rolls down. It becomes like prostitution first and gambling. But as everyone knows, prohibition is kind of what puts most of what we so-called refer to as the mafia into rum running and bootlegging. That was a revenue stream, but they had a lot of legal enterprises too, right? Like it's not an unknown that this guy by the name of Tony Arcata, we call him Big Tuna. He allegedly becomes head of the Chicago outfit. He got 2 grandsons that's in the NFL right now. He also bought the property that kind of becomes Darren, Illinois, right? So.
Way out too.
Yeah, but the Chicago allegedly, because I wasn't there, but they're the ones that built Vegas, right? You ever seen Casino? It's based on Chicago. The entire movie is based off of the Chicago mob. Lucky Rosenthal is named after a real Chicagoan, right? Remo is Big Tuna. Nikki that gets buried is based off of Chicago, and like the whole story is Chicago.
Dang, that's crazy. And then you mentioned going back into the old school gangsters like Al Capone, Scarface, whatever. What can you say about them that maybe we don't even know about?
I think most of it has already been said. What most people, I give you something a lot of people don't know. Al Capone's the reason why expiration is on milk.
What?
Yeah, it's 1,000% true, right? Before Al Capone days, there was no expiration date on the milk.
Okay.
Right? You just had to pay attention and smell it and pour it out. But milk can go bad before it gets that smell, right? It could be no good for you. And so one of his children got really sick and almost died. And he went on a rampage and said, a bunch of milkmen ain't gonna make it to their homes no more if we don't do something about it. And so the dairy industry, scared of Al Capone, decided to put an expiration date on all milk cartridges so you know when to throw it away.
That's crazy.
They come from Al Capone.
Al Capone, man. Just even think about him, all that history. Even his little rampages. Where was that? How far?
So he spanned the city, right? He has a house. He owned a house on 71st Street, right?
Southside?
Yeah, near King Drive. I think 71st and Prairie is where his home was. But he also owned the Green Door, right? The Green Mill, I should say, that's up there on Lawrence. So that he starts off as this South Side, right? His headquarters is the Lexington. It's on 22nd in Michigan. It's not there anymore. But then eventually, after the war with the Irish gangsters, he takes over the whole city. So there ain't a part of Chicago that didn't have his footprint on it, a thumbprint on it.
Okay, wow. Yeah. And then the whole history after that.
Yeah, the St. Valentine's Day Mass was really close to here. It's Clark Street, you know, in between like Chicago and Division.
Damn, really?
Yeah.
What?
Really close.
I go there. I like go there to go to work all the time. That's crazy.
Really close, yeah. After it happened, the city immediately tore down the building because people was going over there taking pictures and stuff. And they just, in those times, right, they didn't understand, like, should we can make money off this? So this may be something people care about 100 years from now. It was an embarrassment to have this place standing that these murders took place in. So that's why they knocked it down so fast.
You know what? That makes sense because over there, I think there's like a big plot of nothing. Yeah. And there may be like a church or a Catholic high school or something like that. So that would make sense. Yeah. Another thing that everyone knows about, of course, we have a great transportation system that's like the best shit almost in the world.
It's top 3 for sure in the world, right? They say it's like Tokyo might be better than us. Tokyo, New York, and us maybe. Yeah. The order.
Yeah. So if you think about things, you know, like our L system, even our metro system and Amtrak system, our logistics, we're in the middle of the country. Like, I guess, how did all that happen? Like, what brought all of those to come to us?
It's exactly exactly what you just said, right? You if you want to be transcontinental, the best place to set up shop is in the middle, right? Because you can service both sides, right? So that's one of the reasons. We do pioneer a lot of stuff, right? So you know how no matter where you are, the third rail is electrified. There's a third rail on public transit comes from Chicago. We came up with that. We elevate them, right? We call ours the L because they're elevated, right? They're in the air versus subways. Excuse me. We did that for a number of reasons. One, the thought was the exhaust from the trains stayed underground. Then they would come up later and you wouldn't have any kind of control over that hazard that it could be. But if it bellowed at the top at the beginning, right, at least you knew it was done. The other thing is it's like it saves on space. So you have more room for housing, right? You got to tear up a lot of stuff to put a subway in, right? But you really only got to clear 4 corners to put the post to put the train in the air, right? Yeah. So that's the other reason that we do it. It's very pioneering. Like I said, we're one of the first places to kind of unify our train stations. So like when you go to Brooklyn and Chicago, all of it was private, right? The red line was called something else and some dude owned it. The green line was called something else and some dude owned it. Lake Street train, some dude owned it. Same thing in New York, right? The A line, the B line. Like Brooklyn was owned by something. And so Chicago eventually buys up all these private companies and creates this one entity, right? So we're pioneers at that too.
I didn't even know that. So the red line was owned by an actual person.
Yeah, it was called the maybe the South Side line. The name escapes me right now, but it used to be called the Howard line. So that was from Howard Street to downtown. Yeah. And then once you got downtown, it was called something else. And then we didn't start naming them by colors. This is the 30th anniversary of like using red line, green line, something, right? They all had former names. And then even before that, like I said, they were all privately owned, right? We did have the Pullman train car company. So today, if you go in New York to LA, you're gonna fly. But what'd you do before it was airplanes, right? You took a train. So if you was gonna be on a train for 2 weeks or a week and a half from New York to LA, you was gonna have to sleep. So Pullman invented these Pullman sleeper cars. So it's like a sitting room. He's the first one to do it. Now they still have sleepers on a train, right? But sleepers are his invention. And so those get made and sold out of Chicago too. And that's also one of the other reasons why we become like the central point for trains because you need to connect those sleepers here.
Thank you so much again, bro, for coming in. I appreciate the history. If there's someone in your predicament right now that you want to speak to that may seek inspiration from you, what would you say to them?
It sounds like the most cliche thing in the world, but keep going, right? Consistency is key. And then I'm a jacket. I just heard Obama say it in this Netflix thing he has. Don't focus on what you want to be, right? Focus on what you want to do. So I had no idea how I would disseminate history. I just knew I wanted to tell the history of Chicago.
Yeah.
And so doing that, there's a number of ways I could do it, right? Instead of like beating yourself up that you didn't become a doctor, why did you want to become a doctor? You want to become a doctor to help people? So work on helping people and you're going to become whatever you want. Just focus on the thing you want to do, right? If you want to inspire, if you want to teach, right? Not necessarily just in a sense, it don't mean that you have to be a teacher, right? You could become a trainer at a company. That's a teacher, right? You could become a trainer in the trades. That's you teaching, right? So focus less on what you want to be and focus everything on what you want to do and then actually go do that. You're going to end up dope as hell. Like, it has no other option but to do that.
Perfect, perfect. Brother, thank you again, man, for being on here.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Okay, back to Juice.
Right? Yeah, they gonna get you.